Welcome to Captive Audience. This is Fabulous Friday, and we are in our third of our fourth series of candidates for the Senate District 29. And tonight, our special guest is Todd Nash. And welcome, Todd, to Captive Audience.
Well, thank you, Sonny. I appreciate the opportunity to get on here with you.
Well, we're happy to have you. And now Todd lives in Wallowa County. He lives in Enterprise, and you are a current county commissioner and former the immediate past president of the Oregon's Cattlemen's Association. You have been quite busy, I gotta say, in a little bit. Definitely, I would say you're busy and advocating for people for a long time, from what I've read a little about your history.
Yeah, I have been. This has been a busy year, finishing up presidency of the Cattlemen's Association in December. Then I'm still on the executive committee there as immediate past president, as you indicated. Trying to run for this seat, this Senate District 29 seat, and announcing a year ago, and then running a small ranch here in Wallowa County. Currently, I serve as chair of the Board of Commissioners here in Wallowa County, and so yep, it's been busy.
Yes, and the campaign season is heating up because it's coming into the primary. So, Todd, I would like for you to please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for Senate District 29.
Yeah, well, I grew up here in Wallowa County. My family moved here in 1968, and so we've been here for a long time. I was just almost 6 years old when we moved here, um, but going back a few years, I was involved in ranching and logging. I worked in a sawmill for 7 years until it shut down. The Boise Cascade Mill shut down in 1994. I had four little kids at the time. Always had my hand in livestock in some way with horses and cattle. And it wasn't until after that time that I started to realize the pressures that come on us from places, not having an adequate log supply was what shut the mill down. And then I went to work on a ranch, and eventually I ended up being a manager of the ranch, and then ended up with some ownership there. But then I found myself advocating not only for myself. Um, I had five endangered species on the ranch I was operating on: bull trout, Chinook salmon, steelhead, wolves, and a little plant called spelling catchfly. And so operating around all those, dealing with state and federal agencies, it became difficult to operate. And so in that avocation, it took me to a place where I was in leadership with Oregon Cattlemen's Association. I've been in some sort of leadership role there, either as a committee chair, treasurer, president-elect, or president for over 10 years. So it's been gratifying to be able to advocate for people and have some successes from time to time, but challenging also.
Well, I'll tell you, and having four endangered species on your property, now that I can, Oregon has been, no, I won't say Oregon, the environmentalists have truly been tying the hands of Oregonians, especially in the logging industry. You can think back to the spotted owl, and that. I remember, and I didn't live here then, but I remember hearing that going, it shouldn't be, in my opinion anyway, about environmentalists being able to shut things down like that. I think that there's a line of compromise and negotiation, but not just flat, like kill an industry.
Yeah. And, over here on this side of the state, we didn't have spotted owl, but we had salmon. And when that listing happened, almost at the same time as what happened with the spotted owl there in the early 90s, and that had a devastating impact on us. we lost our market share in the world, and never did regain that. And we have standing timber here in a lot of areas in Eastern Oregon that doesn't have enough value to harvest it and take it onto a mill. But I cut short just a little bit. I guess in 2016, I was asked to run for a county commissioner position. There had been a long-standing commissioner there. He'd been there for 18 years. And when he stepped down, I got asked to run for that position by the Central Committee here. And so I did. I threw my hat in the ring, and I ended up winning that in the primary in a three-way race, and really have been since 2017. I took the office. It's been a wonderful place to be able to advocate for my community that I love so much. And on that, one of the timber sales that got litigated on right off the bat here, I was able to get some legal counsel at Western Resources Legal Center. They helped us in that case, and we took that all the way to the Ninth Circuit and won that. And that was something we were just used to getting beat up on and never winning and pushing back and just saying, oh, we lost again. But really gratifying to be able to get a win out of that.
Yes. Was that the Elliott Forest?
No, that wasn't the Elliott. It was much smaller than that. It was the Lostine Corridor.
Okay.
And and that was a little canyon that runs right up out of the town of Lostine. There's one way in, one way out, and single lane traffic in a lot of places. And it had been identified as a safety hazard, because if a fire started up in there, it was just a big chimney. And so part of what they were doing there was not only extracting some timber out of there that was marketable, but also they were going to provide an area that they could land a helicopter in, thin some of it out, have some defendable spaces, really put some meaning to the safety portion of it. And the timber volume was really a side to that, but there was, in the 2018 Farm Bill, there wasn't a place in there for up to 3,000 acres to do something like this. And Chris Stein, that was our forester here in this area for the Forest Service, she's passed away now, and I really appreciate her hanging herself out there on the first one that was done in the nation, and then us pushing it through on the other side and making sure that it actually got across the goal line. That was a big deal for us.
I'll tell you, anytime you can have a win in the legislation for the good of the community, I think that's always good. That's always good. So your advocacy work for yourself and the community and whatnot, and your has led you to run for Senate District 29 then.
Yeah, and that was a kind of an interesting transition too. When Greg Barreto was serving and was a representative of House District 58, Greg and I and his family, we became almost like family. I ended up staying down there most of the time. Early on, when I worked for the Cattlemen's, I was on my own dime, and so he knew it and offered me a place to stay. And Chris would usually get up and cook breakfast, and I just felt like I was pretty spoiled there with them. Senator Hansel ended up living with them later on, staying there with us during the session. They had a nice house there in Salem. But anyway, when Greg stepped down from that position after 6 years, he asked me to run for Senate District or House District 58, and I just couldn't at the time. There was too many things going on at the ranch, and one thing or another, and my wife and I talked about it, and so I went back to him, and I respected Greg so much, it was hard for me to say no, but I said, Greg, I just can't right now. It's not going to work. And he said, well, I understand that. He said, there's going to come a time when you can, Todd, and you do it then. And so I always kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And when I knew Senator Hansel was going to step down, my wife and I talked it over and said, we can do it now. So, I was glad to jump in the race and eager to do so. We were the first ones to file for any office in the entire state. So anyway,
Boy, how I miss the Barrettos. Greg and Chris are wonderful. And
yeah,
I so miss their leadership
yeah,
in our party, and also in at the house. At our house, I believe they had quite a large influence to the positive. Just they're wonderful, gracious people.
yeah.
Um,
Like I said, I consider them family after all this time, and really respect and admire both of them. But even their kids, they had servants' hearts, and
mhm.
I remember one of the first nights that I stayed there. Um, One of their sons said, "I'll get a glass of water and put by your nightstand." they, they were just so gracious, and Greg, when he first went down, we were talking about some legislation. We worked on some things, and he called me up and he said, "Todd, they want me to trade on a bill, and in order to get yours through." And he was telling me about it, and I said, "Well, Greg, don't do that. Don't feel like you need to compromise anything like that on my behalf, or we'll work something out in another year, another session." And he said, "Well, I wasn't going to, but I was just explaining to you why I wasn't going to." But he did garner respect there in the House, and throughout the Capitol. You couldn't help but respect and admire him because he wasn't able to be bought.
And that's the type of representatives we need, are those that are not willing to be bought. So, I would like to ask you, what are the two items that you see as the most important issues affecting Oregon? I know we have a myriad of them, but
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to just ask two, or answer two, pick two. And also, if elected, how can you help to fix these two?
Excuse me. Well, I think that the two biggest things out there um, are public safety and what we see in the decay of what's happening in Oregon, and 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 some of the lawlessness. There's a big effort to address what took place with Measure 110.
Mhm.
Um, I think that is a major function of government too, to keep everybody safe, and to protect the people, and even to protect those that would be um, involved in drugs, and taking them, and going down that road, whether they have mental health issues to begin with or whatever the case may be. But that's a that's a huge issue right there. Um, Inflation, and I don't know, your follow-up question is going to be really tough with these, but inflation, the cost of housing, the cost of everything, it just seems to be getting away with. Excuse me, I got this cold going on.
Yeah, Todd has just let me know he got a cold, and
Yeah.
so we're going to bear with you. We're hoping that
All
you'll
right.
get better
All right.
soon. So
I'll get a little shot of water here.
there we go.
Inflation, um, that the housing problem, so many of the problems that we're facing right now
Hmm.
have to do with those constraints of inflation. The cost of a vehicle, um, just putting groceries on the table, all of those things. Um, I think if we could work on those two things alone, that would be uh, giant for what is Oregon, what is our country for that matter.
Yeah, now I can see how you can, as a senator, I could see how you could help to work on public safety. Um, but I have to say, I don't know how you can work on the inflation part. Yes, you can help with housing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and you asked me what I saw as the biggest problems, and so those to me are the two biggest problems.
Hmm.
But yeah, how do we work on it now? My gosh, yeah. Um, it um, I don't know. In a lot of cases, I don't know how to work on some of those things. You know, there's been discussion on workforce housing, and
Hmm.
um, how far down that road do we go of making sure that those that that would work, be willing to work, that we grant affordable housing to them? Is that a function of the government? What I think in workforce housing, and this is just me, and I don't have a ton of buy-in on this, but there's some people that are intrigued by it. Workforce housing, when you look at what was done on farms and ranches for a long time, was if you came to work for us, you have a place to stay. We'll pay your utilities even. Maybe we'll even throw a half a beef in. We'll give you a vehicle. Some of those things, if we gave incentives to places that would employ so that they could have their own housing and then be able to manage it. And so if you're working for an outfit and you name it, whether it's a hospital or a school or it's an industrial park or whatever the case may be, and they have their own housing, and maybe they set it up as transitional to where they had to renew a contract every 6 months, but we were able to give them some sort of a financial break to be able to do that, and then give them some authorities also that to evict and get rid of people that aren't good employees or good land tenants. So anyway, that's one of the things that I think um, could maybe be a benefit to people. It one gets them back in the workforce, gives them a place to live, and incentivizes those industries to provide housing.
Well, so I live in a community. We have we have farm worker housing here, and I see no qualms about that at all. And but what you've mentioned as I'm listening to you speak, I'm going, well, actually, I know private industry that is doing that right now, that they are providing housing, not necessarily here in Oregon. I have a family member who is in Wyoming works in a ski resort, and the housing is so expensive that the company she works for, which is not, it just happens to be a ski resort, but the company that she works for actually provides, um, pays for their housing all but just a couple $100. She
Um,
still has to
yeah,
pay. It's subsidized, but
yeah,
they choose this is private industry. It's actually a very high end restaurant that she works for. And it is not just management, it is even the staff, the servers
right.
that they are subsidizing. And if so, I think for private industry to do it is fine. On the other hand, on for public funds going to that, I have to think about that because I actually hadn't heard talk about that. So that's the first time I've, you know, um, heard about
Well,
that. We do need more housing, which is why they've wanted to expand urban growth boundaries,
right.
right? The governor has said, hey, you can all expand your urban growth boundary one time. And some coming from Southern California, when a city, for example, where my husband lived in Hermosa Beach, it's only 1 square mile. and they had a 2-story limit on all buildings. Well, once that got full and couldn't hold anymore, they allowed them to go up 3 stories.
Okay.
So usually people go up. And out here in Eastern Oregon, we're sprawl,
Yeah.
and frankly, I like that. But there are other solutions as well. Okay, well, what about public safety?
Well, public safety, I like bringing things back to as much local control as possible. So, bolstering our sheriff's departments and making sure that there's funds available. So in counties, especially small counties like my own here, the biggest line item for the general dollars um, go to the sheriff's office, and we get a little bit of help. A lot of these counties have a lot of federal land. We have about 60% of our land base, and we get a little tiny bit of money for those federal lands. But so there's, I think we could have a discussion about the federal government chipping in a little bit more money and not having just federal cops, but chipping that back to the sheriff's office, that we get to elect and decide who we want as sheriffs at that local level. And I think that that's important. The same with the state. Instead of bolstering up the state police, trying to make sure that each of the sheriffs in the counties have a little more of the share of the funds to go around. And then there's things like what we saw with Measure 110, excuse me. And when that happened, when that actually passed, the first thing I did that morning was I walked down, I talked to our sheriff, I talked to our district attorney or county council and said, look, can we put an ordinance in our county that says, they may have decriminalized it everywhere else, but it's still a criminal use here. And one of the things that I found that was disturbing is they have taken away the authorities to garnish wages, to have any sort of retribution here at the most local level. And so to be able to have those authorities back here again to where we could say, not in our county, maybe not in Eastern Oregon, you can't do that, I think is an important part of what we could do here. And I know that's probably really a heavy lift, but I think it's an important thing to try to bolster that instead of having what almost seems like a state police that doesn't necessarily reflect our values or doesn't necessarily reflect our election process. It's a detachment and that wasn't even the way it was set up. In 1930, when the state police was established here in Oregon, they were established for 2 functions. One was to assist the sheriff's office with highway patrol and with game violations. That was the purpose of setting up the state police, and they worked for the sheriffs. And now it's a little independent from that. And so I think we need to get back to those core values and really emphasize that the sheriff is the highest elected law enforcement authority in each of our counties, and bolster that up.
Yes, and I'm going to give a plug for Will Lathrop, because if we get him elected Attorney General, that can also help our state with the rampant crime, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all love Will,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had the privilege of running cattle right next to his dad, and I got to see Will grow up a little bit. Of course, I didn't know him all that well as a young child, but just an excellent family. And Will he's doing such a great job getting out there and getting his message. I hope that he can beat Dan Rayfield, and I've contributed to him several times. And I would encourage people, if they have
Yes,
some money to throw at a campaign, I think this is worthwhile to try to bolster Will up here, get him across the
absolutely.
finish line.
I'll tell you, having I think Will as our Attorney General will make a huge difference to the state of Oregon. It really, really will. And you know,
Oh,
when a person is elected, they're not under the guise of another person. That
right.
is a position of their own. And I think we've got to do everything we can, in my opinion, to help him get elected, put a sign out, donate, whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what is your opinion about wolves in Oregon? So, I don't want to, I've got several questions I want to get to. So, we can do a little.
Yeah, and so I've been it'd take people's breath away a little bit, when I would go to testify in Salem or before the ODFW Commission, because I'd usually start out with something really honest, like if we had our druthers, no wolves would be here at all. We didn't want them to begin with. We knew what the outcome was going to be, and now we're living with them, and we're the ones that have to deal with them. So my first opinion is this isn't going to be a good fit. It's not going to work out well for the wolves. It's not going to work out well for the livestock industry. It's not going to work out well for wildlife on Gillens, for that matter. So that's my basic opinion right there, and then you can get into details beyond that.
Okay. So, what is your opinion on the invasion of the illegals entering Oregon? And I would like to know, since you are a commissioner, is Wallowa County a sanctuary county?
It's listed as a sanctuary county, and I don't know how it got listed as a sanctuary county. I just, it was one of those things when that list was published. I looked at it and went, "What the heck is this?
Mm-hmm.
And where did it come from?" So I don't know how you get listed as a sanctuary county or not, but and how you get off that list, for that matter. So,
Well,
but I think we are. I think we are. Yeah.
okay. And then what do you think about all of the illegals entering Oregon?
Well, I legal entry is great. Most of our ancestors got here from a legal entry one way or another. Maybe it was illegal, but at any rate, there's a process to get in here. And but no, the illegals that are coming in, terrible. We don't see it here. We don't have as big an impact here in the far northeast corner as a lot of places. But when I go to conferences and I talk to some of those ranchers that are down there, New Mexico and Texas and Arizona, the stories they tell are just horrific. And seeing on the news the constant flow come across, it's just unbelievable that we haven't been able, well, haven't had the political will to stop it.
Yeah. The invasion yesterday of their, about 100 people pushing past the National Guard was just beyond the pale, actually.
Yeah.
What is your greatest accomplishment as a county commissioner?
Oh, greatest accomplishment. Boy, you put me on the spot there. Going back a few years, the Blue Mountain Forest Plan was rolled out, and it didn't reflect the needs and the values of what we thought it should look like. And then as county commissioners, you have a different status also as being able to coordinate with federal agencies and some of those things. So we got the Blue Mountain Forest Plan about a week before the general public did. And now I was shocked that was our level of coordination. And so in looking at that, it was 6,000 pages, this giant document that had been being worked on for 14
Oh, I
years.
remember it well.
Yeah. And so anyway, looked at it and had a lot of it scrutinized by some of the folks in the timber industry. It was calling for a cut of 65 million board feet off the Wallowa Whitman, and Umatilla was similar, and Malheur. It wouldn't provide for what we needed. It didn't address what we thought was needed as far as forest health response, and there was a whole litany of things. In the grazing portion of it, we had major concerns. So we were over there in the office in Umatilla County at the Forest Service office that's out there kind of by the casino. And there was a bunch of us commissioners sitting there with the Forest Service, and Jim Pena from Region 6 was there, the 3 forest supervisors from the 3 represented. And so they started talking about how it was going to get rolled out and all the process. And I wanted to know. I was asking questions. And so one of the things that they did was the 3 forest supervisors went back to Washington, D.C. with Jim Pena, and they presented it to the chief of the Forest Service. And so they're explaining all this, and the wheels in my head start spinning. And so I said, can one of us go with you? And he said, well, I don't know. I can find out. And so to his credit, he called back and he said, look, one commissioner can go. And so we talked it over, and we decided that one individual would be Mark Owens. And so Mark was, he's a state representative for House District 60 now, but he was a commissioner at the time. And they decided that I should go with him as well. Now, I didn't get to go in the room with the chief when it was delivered. They decided on one. But we set up appointments for about a week. And so we got busy scheduling, and we got a little help. And we spent a week back there, and we trooped all over Washington, D.C., knocking on doors, trying to get in where we could to tell our story on a number of levels, including wolves and others. Now, Mark and I took office at the same time as President Trump took office. And so this was in December of that first year when we went back. And so there was a lot of things in flux. There was a lot of brand new appointments, how to operate. But anyway, we had some really candid discussions about the forest plan and really what should be done. And we said, really, we think it should be thrown in the garbage and start over again. And so we got that message across. And then when they came out, when I say they, the team that worked on the plan from Washington, D.C. came out, and they heard firsthand what we were saying from our community. That's what they did. They threw it away and said, okay, start again. And this time, you commissioners get a seat at the table as we develop it. So we've been in that process, but that was huge to me. But it all started with asking for something that we'd never had before.
Well, I'll tell you, that was huge. And that was something that I was going to every meeting that they had and being there to ask questions and testify.
Yeah.
And I remember one particular of our county commissioners at the time, he would say, you're showing up again? I said, oh, yeah. Because they're wanting to shut the roads down as well. And that was really big that they did throw it in the trash and said, we have to start the process over again. And now that is, well, good for you. Good. I didn't know. I'm glad I really asked you that story to hear a little bit of background.
And we're still working on it. It's been embarrassingly slow to get where we're at. And I'm really not encouraged by what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Um, the the baseline document that's come out that kind of gives us our assessment of where we're at.
I'm not either.
It's I'm very disturbed, and I've told them, I said, if we don't get it right, I'm going to be on the other side of this thing objecting again. We have to do something that reflects our community and the will of our communities.
Good. Keep fighting for us. Keep fighting while you're a commissioner there, because that is a big deal. Okay, so what is your position on school choice and the money following the students?
It'll be wonderful to be able to take that $10,000+ and give it back to people and allow them to educate their young people where they see fit. I'm all for that. Yeah, competition makes the world go around, and and even for me in this race, I was thinking about that today. I would much rather not have anybody running against me, but in the end, I think it makes me a better candidate too, and hopefully a better senator should I win the day. But that competition, that's what drives people to be better, and so yeah, I'm all for these charter schools. The homeschool people, if they can figure out ways that they can educate their kids better, because I hear it, during COVID especially, there was a lot of kids that got pulled out of school, and there's still a lot of kids, with the diversity, equity, inclusion. There's any number of reasons that people have pulled their kids out of school, and I hear it from the teachers. We need to get them back. Well, you need to be able to compete on that level that draws them back.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty hard to compete when you have $10,000 over here and you have nothing here, and so it's an uneven playing field at this point.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So do you support the Senate walkout? When the senators walked out, and then if you are elected, would you walk out? Is there an item, that you could pop in your head that you would say, you know what, I'm willing to do that, put it on the line?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's one of the only tools left there. And there's some of those thresholds that are going to be there that have to do with, when we start infringing on some of those things that we fought for in our First Amendment, Second Amendment, some of those constitutional rights that definitely there. And then when you get into some of those ethical questions, definitely would walk out. I wasn't looking for a career when I entered into this as a county commissioner. I'm not looking for a career. I'm looking to serve here. So it wouldn't cause any consternation whatsoever to me when I came down to the wire.
Okay, I'll tell you, I was happy to see our senators and supported them walking out. I wish they would have stayed gone until the last day, which is what they had said they would have done or were going to do. I was disappointed they went back early. That's just my personal view, and I'm proud of them for going out to shut down some of the radical ideas that are coming out from the Democrats in Oregon.
Yeah, and there's varied opinions on that, and there's some real hard feelings there with some of the Senate Republicans and others about all that. I say I wasn't there. I don't know what was the best thing to do, and but yeah, I appreciated them doing that, Um, it was a little different than last time because they kept going to committee meetings and they kept
Hmm.
trying to work and do some of that, but they
Hmm.
just didn't show up to the floor and
Well, they
um,
weren't threatened with arrest this last time.
yeah, and that
Before they were threatened with arrest, they had to leave the state.
yeah, and that goes back to the state police shouldn't be working for our governor. They shouldn't be um, you know they should be there to assist our sheriffs
But
and
I totally agree, but they are an agency. They're not elected, they're appointed.
right, yeah, yeah. But if you
And
look at
that makes a
that
difference.
charter has never been changed, and that charter of what their function is, I think that is challengeable who they actually work for.
Oh, this is good. I like talking about charter work, and things to look at historically. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Okay, what are your views on gender affirming care for children?
Well, um, I I blissfully don't hardly know what that is, but I do know that we've got into a really weird area with uh,
Hmm.
with trying to let these young people say, well, you don't have to go through puberty. If you're not comfortable moving on to the next stage and just staying neutral. I don't even know it's so foreign, but it's also very prevalent. But no, I I just no, it's nowhere that we need to be, um, especially these young kids. Um, if we let these young kids start making some major life decisions on their own, um, we're going to end up. It's just going to be a train wreck. Um, their their little minds aren't developed well enough to do that.
Hmm.
Um,
So
it's
some of it though is the parents. The parents are deciding my children is going to be this or my child's going to be that. And and I can speak for myself. I was very, very much a tomboy. And so I thank God that this was not around when I was growing up. But excuse the phone ringing there. Somebody will pick it up in the house. And but it's about the child from my viewpoint. And um I'm seeing so I'm going to ask that you're not wouldn't support some legislation that says, it's whatever the child wants over the parent, because right now in the state of Oregon, it's pretty radical about what can go on at a school
you know,
affecting children.
no, and, that was part of the walkout. And when you're posed with sending your children to school as a boy, and at the end of the day, possibly coming home as a girl, um, that's and not even having parental input,
Hmm.
not good. But no, these young people, they don't need to be manipulating their bodies, even if they have a progressive parent. I wouldn't support the parents trying to lead them that way and support that. That just doesn't seem responsible. I've known older adults that have decided that they weren't the right gender, and
Hmm.
they did it in their 40s and 50s. And to me, it's foreign, but uh, we live in a free country where I just say, if that was your decision, but um, we don't allow kids to buy tobacco until they're 21 in Oregon.
Right.
And so we're going to say you can do something that, could radically change your entire being. No, it's just not a place we can go.
Okay. Okay, what are your thoughts on climate change and the global initiatives?
Well, you know, when they first started talking about global warming and how radically it was going to change everything, heck, we thought in the cattle industry, well, maybe we'll get to churn out a little bit earlier, but we're still turning out the 1st of May, and a lot of times the grass isn't developed at that point. So we have a pretty good handle on what climate change looks like, and then also, you look at the snowpacks around, and we are getting out of 4 years where we had La Nina pattern, which is very rare. I don't ever remember a time when we had 4 years of that type of pattern. This is the first El Nino that we've seen, and people are saying, wow, what a different winter. Well, yeah, it is a different winter. I mean, so we have those things that are a little consistent with climate, but as far as the oceans rising and all of these things, it's very difficult to measure that we've had something really significant change over time. But we've seen times when the North Pole had less ice, and southern hemisphere, and I think that we've been changing for a long time since the Ice Age, and I don't need to look any further than Wallowa Lake that was carved out by a giant glacier to think I don't want to go back to that. That must have been a little rough. So anyway, that's there's probably some change going on. It's slow. I don't know how much of it is attributed to man-made causes, but I think a lot of what we attribute to climate change is actually just changes in weather patterns that are very natural.
Okay. Do you think that we need to get to the net zero that the governor would like to do? The mandate that she's put on the state of Oregon, our previous governor, really, who's put that.
Right. Yeah. And I think net zero would be very difficult to attain. If we can find a way that we can run with less fuel than what we're running with now, or with less lithium, or whatever the case may be, I think that's a positive thing. I think there could be some positive things out there on the horizon that haven't been invented yet, and or maybe being worked on. Hydrogen is still intriguing. Nuclear is one of the cleanest options out there. You run these big giant ships and submarines, and they built in a nuclear plant right in the middle of it, and they put enough uranium that they can deplete that over time for 40 years for the life of the ship. I mean, it's incredible what they do. And so there are some things out there that I think could be really beneficial. But let's not put a mandate out there. Let's let industry drive it, and let's find a way that we can incentivize, and hopefully, we all want a cleaner, healthier planet, and so I think it's aspirational to try to do some of those positive things, but just to put it in a piece of legislation and go, well, here you go, you got to be net zero by this date, that's silliness.
Okay. Well, so in dealing with legislatures and elected people, I have found that some people are reactive to situations while others are proactive. Which are you?
Well, a little of both. Honestly, I found myself playing defense on a number of pieces of legislation, but I've been a proponent and taken a piece of legislation almost every year going back to, I don't know, 2010 or something like that, and trying to develop things that needed some changes. And, you mentioned wolves earlier, and that was one of the things, but and wolves, they didn't have a lot of those laws. We didn't have wolves for a long time. And so we went from a wolf population that allowed for um, a bounty to a protection. And so we had some giant leaps to make as far as refining some of the laws around that. So anyway, but yeah, we've taken some. There was another one last year. I took a couple of them last year, but one of the ones that took a hard look at was we'd been vaccinating cattle for brucellosis for 50 plus years.
What's
And
that?
Brucellosis,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a disease that causes abortion in livestock. It can be transmitted to human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and you can contract it through milk. Um, Meat doesn't seem to be as contractable. There's a population of bison that is over there around Yellowstone Park that carries it, and occasionally it'll transmit to cattle, but it's mostly contained there. And they have some really restrict um, um, things in play to keep it from getting out of that area. But anyway, we haven't had a case here in Oregon for 25 years, and it's a slow-moving disease, but it's mandatory that everybody in Oregon had to vaccinate their female cattle with brucellosis and have a veterinarian do it. So it's pretty expensive for a lot of people, especially the ones with smaller herds, to do that. And so talking to the state veterinarian, talking to others, maybe we take a look at this instead of just doing the same thing, and why it ever got put into a piece of legislation to begin with, and why it wasn't just handled through ODA and through our state veterinarian like so many other ideas. But anyway, we took a look at that and ran a bill on that, and it's no longer mandatory. We still have the program. If people want to continue to do it, there's good reasons to do it. Some of the other states require it still, and so if you're going to ship cattle out of state, you may want to continue to do that. But it's just one of those things we looked at and go, well, it's a little more freedom that you have that you didn't have prior to. But
Well, that's being proactive. That's good.
yeah.
Okay, Todd. Well, that's the end of my questions. And I would like for you to give you the opportunity to tell everybody why we should vote for you. Your closing arguments.
Oh boy. There's nothing that is especially special about me, but I'm tenacious, and so I will work hard. This district, I live the furthest away from sales relationships with the folks across the agencies, legislators, and I know the process fairly well. It's going to be a big learning curve getting on the other side of the diocese and learning all the systems that are there. But I'll work. I have a long track record of working hard for the folks that have either been in the cattle industry or my county. I'm endorsed by Oregon Right to Life, the only one of the four that is. Oregon Farm Bureau endorsed me. Oregon Firearms endorsed me. And so Timber Unity endorsed me. So, and I'm the only one of the four that got those endorsements. And I got a lot of others too. And they're really meaningful, the individuals that were willing to do that. But I got those endorsements because of the work that I've done in the past and what I have proven that I will work on, the dependability of the vote that you can have in me and the trust you can have in me.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And Todd, thank you for coming on Captive Audience and being here and going through my questions. It's been a pleasure, especially since I know you feel a little under the weather. And so I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, and I apologize for the coffee. Probably a little unpleasant there, but yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great opportunity.
And so, our viewers, if you would like and share this everywhere, as usual, thank you and have a great weekend. Good night.